Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined as always, and forever, by my like it or lump it.
That had a tone.
All right. By my good friend, my business partner, Mr. Jason Johnston Yellen, NPH.
Thank you.
In the Hussey. But
Also,
we are absolutely honored to be in the company of our very own Jess Lomas.
No middle name.
Jessica Rabbit Lomas.
There we are.
Ooh, sorry about that.
Just checking.
there we are.
Yeah.
Welcome to Elgin.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're in Bonnie, Scotland. Wee Bonnie, Scotland.
Said the guy from Virginia to the lass from Glasgow in the presence of the chap from Connecticut. Welcome to Elgin.
This definitely sounds like the start of one of those complicated a rabbi, a priest, and an elephant walk into a bar.
Ooh, an elephant.
Yeah.
It's just the way I tell them.
A minister, a priest, and a rabbit walk into a typo.
Hey.
Well done.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's nice. You know, Jason, you and I have come out to Scotland to conduct business.
We have.
For the company for many years.
We have come out to Jess.
We've come out to Jess. We
Good.
finally come
I'm
out
glad
to
you two
Jess.
finally reached the same conclusion as the rest of us.
But this is the first time where the three of us are together, traveling around and doing business together as a company, as a 3-person company here. So that feels kind of momentous, and I just I want to raise my glass to you guys and just say it's absolutely lovely being with you.
Are you ready for the worst cling ever?
Some horrific water glasses getting clanged together there in a B&B room.
I'm so proud of 3 industry professionals with 3 of the most hideous glasses.
Yeah. I looked at the tasting glasses. I thought, should I pack them? Should I take them? And I just didn't have the room. Maybe it was the 3 bottles of Westland I was bringing for Jess.
Should you pack them? Should you take them?
I've got 3 Westlands for Jessica Rabbit Lomas.
No complaints here.
But I was going to say on the back of your comment, Joshua,
Good.
that's what happens when you hire a global sales manager right before a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And so we had one meeting, the 3 of us in person in Glasgow, at the Glasgow Hilton across the M8 from the Bon.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, let's do this again in the spring. And the spring was 2020. And I'm not going to belabor the point. We didn't see you until I came over last May of 2022. We lost Joshua because he had COVID.
Yep.
No, he just didn't want to come.
Oh, he did.
So I just went out. I just looked for anyone who had COVID. I started licking them. Just.
He desperately wanted to come on that trip. Desperately. But as much as you couldn't come on it because of COVID,
Yeah.
I couldn't go home because of COVID. And I got 10 bonus days in Scotland with the old COVID. So,
Hashtag bonus.
so here we are, September of 23. Absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
Getting to hang out in person again. That's wild.
Yeah, it does feel very weird when you were like, I was here and I could see your brain do the maths.
Yeah.
And I also was like, I couldn't tell you what last year's year was.
Yeah.
2020, could be 2019, could be 2018. Time no longer has any concept.
1970.
1930.
Could be 2028. Who the heck knows?
No, don't make it into the future. That makes it worse.
So listen, to your point, though,
Yes.
as Jess being our global sales manager, you've come back from somewhere in England and also Tel Aviv. I forget where it is. Is Manchester? Old England?
Bad geographying there.
York?
You're forgiven. I was in Newcastle.
Getting warmer.
Newcastle.
different accents, which, as previous outings on the podcast, I will not be repeating those accents. I think I'm still banned from London, so sorry, London people. Yes, I was in Newcastle at the Indie Bottlers Indie Love Fest. Run by the...
I love that name.
Yeah. It sounds even better when you say it in a Geordie accent, which sadly...
Go on.
Oh.
It's the way they say love.
Say love.
How do they say
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah, love.
Indie whist... No. Scratch that.
Why
I got in a lot of trouble. Yes, so that's where I was for
Right.
the weekend 2 weekends ago. Who am I anymore? I went to Newcastle and we drove down and we had a lovely 2-session festival, and it's the first time I've ever been at a whiskey festival where it was all indie bottlers with, and this feels appropriate for where we are currently, just one bottler who was a distillery, and that was Glenmurray.
Right.
And that's because Carl, who organises the festival, it's his favourite distillery.
That's fantastic.
I think he has a little asterisk. So he's like, and Glenmurray. So that was really nice.
We literally came from Glenmurray to our bed and breakfast to record. And you're telling us Glenmurray was the only non-IB at an IB festival.
Amazing.
Correct.
That's remarkable. Sometimes the whiskey world just works out in fantastic ways.
It's a small place. It's a very small place.
Wow.
So
So back up just for a hot second. You're talking 2 sessions. 2 sessions across the same day.
yeah. Across the same day.
How many hours for each session?
Oh, gosh.
How many punters approx?
Listeners of the padcost, this is stats happening
is
in
it.
front of your ears.
This is business happening live.
We're here doing business. So 2 sessions of 3.5 hours.
3.5 hours.
Yeah. And a little hour gap in the middle for us to eat, fill our bellies, and then go back to pouring for some happy punters in a brewery.
How was the food?
There was a Greek food stand at the back. I think it's technically a caravan, which pleased me massively. So they were making a really good like gyros, which is also not how you pronounce that word.
The heroes? Were the
I thought it was gyros.
Gyros. We're back to accents again. Let's not do this.
Help.
Let's not do this.
You're getting just mildly...
That was warmed up.
You're getting a bit
don't
fresh.
Don't do that. Anyway.
Some delicious chicken in a pita bread with some kind of tzatziki thing on it. Very good.
Scale from 1 to 10. How is their tzatziki?
I have no reference point. I was very hungry, and it was exactly what I needed.
So it was just amazing.
It was a straight 10. It was
there you go.
food handed to me, consumed, and then back to the
Funneled into
cold
the
face as it was.
Yeah. Okay.
So 2 sessions, hours break. What was your next question?
Ballpark number of punters?
I don't have enough fingers to count that.
Okay. Good attendance? You felt
I
you were
like there was-
busy
yeah,
for
like a
both sessions?
Nice bunch of people, loads of lovely people asking questions, trying things. Thank you to the people that bought bottles. That was very nice of you. Meant I had fewer to carry home.
Okay.
That's great that you were able to sell
you
on
go.
the spot.
Also super unusual. Most festivals in the UK are done in partnership with a retailer. So you have to do the old take a photo of the bottle, point them in the direction of the shop, and off they go. Whereas here was great. I have a new card machine. And as it's just me, you and the listeners, I'll tell you that I may have been most excited about using the card machine.
All right.
Slightly more than pouring whiskey. Not because I'm not excited about pouring whiskey, because I always am. But the card machine, let me tell you guys, it's amazing. It's all touch screen. You do a boop boop. It's got photographs on it. I can upload images of the stock.
We're recording on it right now.
Yeah, I'm actually, and I'm listening to.
I bought 3 bottles in the time we've done this introduction.
All the listeners are panicking now. They're like, "Are my card details attached to this device?"
Yeah, if you could just wave your credit card past your phone right now, we'll just send a bottle to you.
Yeah,
You didn't have to tap.
Nope,
It's
don't
great.
even have to tap.
If you want to decline the transaction, press hash key twice. Beep beep.
Turn around 3 times.
Say the word no. Stop. So that was really fun. We had some bottles. We had the RW4 to pour for people. Four. I had a few old favourites out of the cupboard that was great fun.
Come on, name names.
A few little cheeky wee numbers that maybe I've borrowed from stocks that previously went to America.
That's it.
Don't make the podcast listeners angry.
Come on, name names.
What did we have? We had one of the four squares that went to the US that we were pouring. What else do we have? We had... I'll tell you what we did great marketing with. The Mac Mirror. Everybody loved the Mac Mirror.
Oh, that's great to hear.
That's really good.
And people were really excited to try it. I have talked previously, it was quite strange to be at a festival not in Scotland, because that's predominantly where I obviously do festivals. Yeah. It was really fun to have people coming up to the stand and from the get-go saying, oh, we hear you have some Swedish whiskey.
Wow.
Can we try it?
Awesome. So glad to hear that.
Yeah, so am I.
That's very cool.
And it wasn't even because I had Swedescott being Swedish behind the table. It was people coming up and being like... We see you've got some Mac Mirror. So that was really good fun.
Yeah. Was there anything particular that they were... Obviously, they'd heard about it, but then anything in particular they liked about it as they were tasting it?
I think people just like the style of the whiskey, that it, at the top of the show, you know, it's quite an easy ABV whiskey to start with.
Yeah, 40
I think
natural.
It's 47.5. People love that. They were very interested in kind of the story that we've talked about before, that the whiskey's aged underground, so that's why it's a funny ABV perhaps for a 13-year-old. People just, you know, lapped it up, and that was great. I was delighted to be pouring it for people.
There you go.
From some of the old archive stock, I had a bottle of the Daluen 8 from one of the previous ROWs.
Okay. Not the happy accident that got sold
Not the happy accident.
online in the US.
That was the 9-year-old.
The little blondie one of ours. And I think I had a split bottle's worth of a Daluen 10 had gone to the US retail. Okay. And people were just loving Daluen as maybe like a slightly unusual edition of it being... a lighter version and kind of just loving it up. We know that we love Daluen, so it's always fun to pour. Just a couple of things that I had in the cupboard that were kind of bottle ends from the bottling runs, because I always love to go to a festival, get people really hooked on something and then tell them they can't have it. So that's how I like to ruin everybody's good day out. So yeah, it was really lovely. It was also really nice to be kind of in a room with, or a spread across, we're in a brewery, spread across a space with a chunk of other independent bottlers who I don't really get an excuse to hang out with very often, so that was really nice afterwards. We all went to the pub, so big shout out to guys like Rachel and George at Fragrant Drops, Andy and Ali at Little Brown Dog, Dana, the guys at Uncharted, Dana and Jack, Paul McKendrick from Lady of the Glen.
Oh, Paul,
so,
awesome.
Like,
just talking about today.
I could literally just reel off most of the indie bottlers that you know, but it was really nice to just be out with everybody. And I've not been in Newcastle for years, so that was great. It's a fun city to be in. Yeah, so that was the Love Festival, Indie Love.
Cool. Before we move away from indie, was there an ROW 4 favourite going across the table?
I honestly think...
Did you pour the darkest Coke Ben Rinnes?
I did, and do you know what's really funny? People liked it, but it's not what they stopped on.
Okay.
Like, we did much better with the Linkwood than the Ben Rinnes.
Oh, the French oak.
So, I mean, like, everybody knows that's kind of a little pet favourite of mine, but I wasn't pushing it particularly hard. And I think people were just really enjoying that kind of very marmaladey, bouncy, delicious liquid of the Linkwood.
Nice.
Definitely people were obviously picking up the Ben Rinnes. It's very hard to have whiskey that colour on a table and have somebody walk on by. But I think...
Gabby Dionne Warwick.
I think, people liked it, but I was surprised because when we've poured dark things at other festivals, you and I both know the reach is a 10-minute mark where that bottle has to go under the table.
Correct.
And the Ben Rinnes was out on the table the whole day.
Wow.
So
that's wild.
Yeah, I guess maybe the people in Newcastle have very different palates.
Or maybe the people who go to IB festivals are
very true. Yeah,
looking for more ex-bourbon or more.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, who knows? Whatever it is, I like that. The color's not going to dissuade some people. That's cool.
It's nice to be on the receiving end of what we try to preach and practice. Right. Don't look at the colour, and then to have a bottle on the table and be like, why don't people want the really dark one? That's what we're training them to do, guys. We're training them to be like, give me the one that's the palest.
Which the Linkwood is not the palest on that table. No, the Linkwood's
not the palest, but that's kind of more chestnutty. I don't put that. That doesn't look like a sherry bomb. It looks like it's got some colour happening in it, but it's not a sherry bomb Coca-Cola in your glass type whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun, and it, like I say, really unusual to be with just indie bottlers, give or take Glenmurray on the table behind us.
Wild.
So
Such a wild notion. Well, as much as you had ROW4 on the table there, we will be back later in this episode to talk about ROW5
dun dun dun.
with you.
Super
But in
exciting.
the meantime,
Yeah. So, as usual, I'm jealous of anybody who gets to go to Israel, and I don't get to go to Israel. But Eve, our importer over there, invited us to Whiskey Live Tel Aviv, which I think
yeah.
Tomer runs that. Does Tomer?
It does.
emanate? Yeah.
I think it's actually a legal obligation for Toma to be involved in every form of
everything.
whiskey
Every
in
form of
Israel.
whiskey. Everything.
And whatever he has time to get involved in, malt stock, whiskey live, whiskey judging.
Yeah.
I am of a firm belief that that man does not sleep.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a... Yeah, there's a superhero thing, like a whiskey superhero.
Maybe he's just reached a point where if he sleeps now, Toma will be like out of the game for 20 years. You know, when you can't stop now. It's in motion, keep going.
Yeah.
This is the end. You can't. The wheels have set off. We can't stop. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he and the guys are very busy running Whiskey Live, which is lovely. I went to Tel Aviv predominantly just to eat things. And I was
hummus.
like, how do I get to expense hummus to the company account?
done and done.
I'll pour whiskey for some people. So
All
it's
of
like,
her receipts were hummus-based
That was-
receipts.
Yep.
yeah, you're joking, but for 3 days, that is pretty much all I've eaten. So, until I went and ate some tomatoes.
All right.
There's a famous-ish chain run by an Israeli chef called Miznon, and he's famous for his obsession with food and kind of heritage and how it ties to the land or the sea. And he does this kind of fairly famous tomato dish. So after 3 days of hummus, I thought I'd mix some vegetables back in. So I had some tomatoes.
I mean, hummus is
It did come with
technically a
hummus and
vegetable.
tahini,
Yeah.
and it was still in a pita,
Well,
so it was in a
tomato's
format.
technically a fruit, so...
So here we
Okay, well, it was still an edible of a.
All right, so you had
Don't mention
edibles as
edibles.
well.
Oh God,
Okay.
no!
This was whiskey
man, it
and
was
weed live
38 degrees. It was too hot for literally everything. If I'm honest with you,
for the Americans
30
out
is
there.
right,
That's
right?
38 centigrade Celsius.
Yeah,
What's
which
that?
probably puts you right around 100. 36 centigrade is 96, 97
Yeah.
Fahrenheit.
Yep.
okay. My only measure to this is to get in a taxi and have an Israeli driver tell you how awful the heat is.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
If
well,
the-
that's good because there's a very pale person who's not great with extreme heat for a long period of time. I did okay. I walked quite a lot of the city, to be honest, and I was impressed by myself because it was really hot.
And you tend to wear darker clothes too. So
Yeah,
that
everybody knows
just-
that I live in black and stripes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like a zebra? I don't know where we're going with this.
You sound like you're in prison.
Yeah, that's very much my
Making
vibe,
license
actually. Now
plates.
you've mentioned it. That's, if
With
you've watched
exposed ankles.
Yeah,
I
I've got
hear
the
you say
ankles
that a
out.
lot.
Easy.
ankles out and the wrists. So,
You're like a Victorian going to the beach.
yeah.
Stripes.
That's absolutely, if I had a Pinterest mood board for my outfits. That crossed with, I take most of my styling from 3-year-old girls. I live in dungarees and pinafores. I very much style myself and my friend's
And
daughter.
headbands. You,
And now I've added
you
headbands.
heard in
I've
Tel Aviv.
fully regressed myself back to primary school level dressing with alcohol. I would like to point out there was none of that. There was no alcohol in primary school. Well, maybe the teachers, but not us.
It's a very complicated vibe. So, what did Whiskey Live look like? Was this your first time at a Whiskey Live? Had you been in other countries? Was it? And this was your first time at
I actually think that might be
Israel's Whiskey Live.
my first Whiskey Live of any
All right.
variety and geographical location. How have I managed that? I guess because there's so many whiskey festivals.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah. Well, you do a lot of the.
I do more kind of
Swedish
like
with the
yeah, I do Cinderella on
Yeah.
Viking line, as the Swedes call it,
Nice, well
Viking line,
pronounced.
Viking line.
Scandies
Yeah.
are loving it.
There you go.
And obviously London Whiskey Show, which
Yep.
I'll be at the end of the month, and Glasgow Whiskey Festival,
Which you'll
I'm
be
looking
at as a punter.
As a punter.
We do not have a table.
Yeah.
There's
Good-
not
good
enough hummus in
clarification.
London for me to put that down as an expensible
Yeah.
trip. So yeah, I have to be a punter at that.
Do you know that I've only ever been to one Whiskey Live? It was Glasgow 2009, and Richard Patterson, who I saw for the very first time, got on a chair to make an announcement to the room.
Uh-huh.
And that was the day that I found out Richard Patterson is not a tall man.
All right. height?
Not at all, man.
Well, you're also very tall.
Yeah,
You're
right,
not
you're
an
a tall
average
man.
height.
And I was traveling with Uncle Carl, who's 6'5".
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
So anybody looks
I
like...
mean, anybody compared to you guys.
But anyway, so that was my one and only Whiskey Live.
Is that the very famous Whiskey Live in Glasgow that everybody talks
That's
about?
not true. You went to Whiskey Live Boston with me.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Was that Whiskey Live?
That was Whiskey Live Boston.
Oh, interesting.
Yep, that was Dave Sweet's first year in Boston.
Ah,
Yep.
nice one. That was fun. That was a good night.
Yeah, I think we went. Did we go with Steve Mathis? The Malt
I
Imposters?
think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I don't remember Dickie P getting on a chair. In Israel, in Tel Aviv,
Israel, yeah,
did Dickie
that's
P
right.
get in a chair?
Dickie P wasn't there.
There, no
And
chairs.
to my knowledge, nobody got on a chair that I know of.
All right.
Yes, I was there with our importer, Eve, as you mentioned, and his business partner, Shai, for vintage whiskey, for those of us who are Israeli-based and listening. And I was invited to host a couple of masterclasses in the evening, pouring predominantly RW4, which Eve has...
Pouring predominantly single cask nation.
I had previously hoped that was a given. I didn't realise I needed to state I was there as single
She's
cask nation.
moonlighting now.
With insert some other brand here.
Right. It's like the old days.
Yeah, I've actually just decided. No, so
Okay.
although when I was on the stand, I was obviously pouring other people that Eve has as part of vintage whiskey. So
So you were doing a bit of moonlighting.
yeah, not as the masterclass, but on the table, he obviously brings in Berry Brothers and Rudd. The Nectar in Belgium, there was a few of their bottles.
Oh, yeah.
Two
Got a
great-
La Chig from them
great
that's
brands. Yeah.
real bright, real fruity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eve himself
Cracker.
has bottled a lovely Kalila 11-year-old, which I will try and find some way to get you some of.
Ooh la la.
All right.
Yeah, it's got a Hieronymus Bosch label on it.
Fun.
Very,
Hieronymus
very,
Bosch?
very dramatic.
What's Hieronymus?
It's one of the art critics of the podcast are going to write in at questions under.
And just to be clear, Haida's degree is in art.
I've
in
had
art history.
full reassurance from Haida she doesn't listen to us, except when it's her podcast.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm not in trouble with her. So that's cool.
They're the kind of like they're that era of paintings. They're sort of 500-600 years old now. They're from like the 1500s. And they're the paintings that have got like lots of things going on. The words for this is totally failing me. So if I was me in the car driving right now, I'd be like, for the love of God.
bloody word.
What is the name of that?
Not so easy when you're on here, is it, Jess? Is it?
Shut up.
Is it?
A baboon.
Yeah. Shouts at us all the time.
So yeah, but it's not the colour of a whiskey. I can't think. They're not impressionists. It's a definite. Yeah. Anyway, they're incredibly detailed, and some of them are quite graphic and quite terrifying to look at. Paintings.
Okay.
What is the word? Do you know this? Or
I
you just
don't know.
you're
I'm
not holding
teasing
at
you.
me?
No,
Okay.
no. Maybe if you say it, I'll be, oh, that's what the word.
I'll think
what you were
about it
thinking
for
was.
halfway through a point when it'll be entirely inappropriate for me to shout the words. Yeah, so Eve has picked this image on the label, and it's quite a cool. It's one of the paintings are of a series where you could kind of look at them for days at a time. There's lots of stuff happening in it, and the detail is incredible.
So like a Where's Waldo / Where's Waldo.
Well, I don't want to reduce it to that, but yes.
Now I get it.
Waldoism.
Now
That's
Where's
the
Waldo
word.
from?
Waldoism.
Waldoism.
From the 1500s. Eve's going to be furious. Sorry, Eve. Yes, so he had his own stuff on the table. Quick, move away from the art. Can't do art, can do
walk
whiskey.
away.
So yeah, we were pouring lots of stuff on the table. And again, Mac Mirror, absolutely, people were loving it.
Wow. There
Right.
you go.
Super
Okay,
good.
loud
Fits
and
with the
clear.
palate. People, again, were
Looks
interested
like
in
we
the story.
need more macromira.
Macromira.
In the bottle.
Macrahanish.
Macrahanish.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say.
Macrame.
Macaroons.
Macaroni.
Oh, now I'm getting hungry.
Stop
Yeah,
it.
you put a feather in your hat and then you call it macaroni. Listen,
Quick, I'll save this.
Okay, go ahead.
My on the Mac Mirror, before we disappeared down that hole, it was really fun to be at a whiskey festival in Israel, pouring our stuff. Very exciting. My first time there as Single Cask Nation. But
that's
on our
awesome.
table, it wasn't just us who had a Swedish whiskey, because Berry Brothers and Rudd have done I think 2 series now of Nordic casks, and Eve had on the table for our Finnish listeners a Tiranpilli,
Oh, nice.
and he had a Smurgen. So that's a
very
smoky
cool.
style Swedish whiskey from the northwest coast from a guy called Per Callenby. Yeah.
Wow. And so a very similar question from Newcastle. What was punter response like around Nordic whiskies, Nordic single casks?
I think because as a market, the kind of people that are going to a whiskey festival in Tel Aviv, they're used to trying, obviously, milk and honey, and I tried a couple of other Israeli whiskies. They're not so tied to the idea of whiskey only being from Scotland. Obviously, the very vast majority of people are Scotch whiskey drinkers and Scotch whiskey fans, but it's not such a weird proposition to be like, oh, well, while you're here, would you like to try a whiskey from Tirrumpilli Distillery?
Nice.
Would you like to try, so...
That's great to hear.
We did really well with all of those. So it was great fun. And it was obviously... I had some little cheeky Westlands that I brought for the masterclass.
I was about to ask if you poured Westlands at your masterclass.
Obviously. I'm legally obliged to only half look like single cask nation, half Westland. Yes, I poured our Moscatel and the peated. That was really painful for me to pour it because I don't like giving those whiskies to anybody.
It is tough.
So Tel
seeing them go
Aviv, you
away.
were lucky people.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah, and they went down really well. I think people were excited to try Westland and something a little bit different that wasn't just as straightforward as it adds an extra complicated level of conversation to be having about, single cask, single malts, but also mixing in then some of the Westland story and our connection to Westland. So.
Yeah, well, and speaking of, on this trip, we haven't cracked it together yet. I don't know if we intend to crack it together, but I brought you the Jack Rose Mezcal Cask Westland.
Yeah.
Can we drink 3 bottles? How many days do we have?
Dude, see if I've said on the podcast before, when we opened Joshua's bottle in Philadelphia, I crushed it. Crushed it. If we open your bottle on this trip, I will crush it. So
when are we dropping this? Because give or take that Swede Scott maybe on an immediate jump in the car. That screeching noise in the distance is him arriving into Elgin.
Yeah, this is being recorded for the future. We will have ended this trip by the time he hears any words. So
that could be even worse. I could be in even more trouble. You'll have left by then.
His bottle broke in transit. Oh,
Oopsie doopsie.
Sorry, pal.
Sorry. Glug 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 glug.
I wouldn't do that to you. It's okay. I'm saying that because you two are going back to the States and I have to remain in this country.
Hell, I'm going back to Jack Rose. I'm there October 1 and I will be getting, well, assuming it's still there, more of the Mezcal Westland.
Okay. I'm thirsty now.
So listen, we need to take a little break from our talking. So we can drink the whiskey that's in our glass. But Jason, can you just give our readers Are they not readers?
They are. I'm wearing
Are we
readers.
not doing this for print?
I'm wearing my bifocals.
Yeah, do we not email
These are
everyone
not my
a-
readers.
I thought we emailed this out. We put it onto a PDF,
PDF,
and we email
send
it
the
out to...
transcript.
Finally, the podcast will have a transcript that I can read. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fan-dabby dozy.
It's going to come out in the next periodical.
At your local library.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much here. Obviously, we've had a ton of fun sitting here talking to each other. I've certainly been dramming away while we've been talking.
Right.
But we are going to go over here to Alan Winchester and Jonathan Christie of the and gosh, when the Scotsman comes home and pronounces the Scottish words to Scots, the number of times I get corrected.
I think she thought you were Irish.
Irish American.
It was his Welsh accent.
And so you're going to hear Alan and Jonathan saying the Cabrach plenty of times.
Yeah.
And I may very well have the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. I will allow them to pronounce it, and I will allow them to set the scene for us.
Yeah.
So the listeners know exactly what is happening in this interview. Hello to Jonathan Christie, Chief Executive with the Cabrach Trust, and Alan Winchester, Master of Malt. With the same, we have been joking today, just cutting straight to legend, but it's brilliant to meet you both, to be on site with you both. I'm a Lowlander. I'm not going to pretend to pronounce the name of the farm where we're sitting. So would you mind, for our listeners, giving the name of the farm and letting us know about the Cabrach Trust, please?
Wonderful. Well, it's great to be speaking with you. And so we're sitting at Inverharrick Farm, which is in the lower Cabrach, on the very rugged edge of Speyside.
And the Cabrach Trust itself, we were discussing before we came in here to start recording, to get this on wax. We're saying the Cabrach Trust has been around 10 years, but until our friend Greg Swartz has started bringing it up to us and talking to us about it, we hadn't heard anything about it. In talking, it sounds like there's been a major push in the last couple of years, almost coming out of this pandemic and really rolling up sleeves and getting to work. Could you frame for us what was going on 10 years ago, and why does it feel like the last couple of years has really been the oomph?
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, before speaking about the Cabrach Trust, I probably kind of set the Cabrach itself in context. So an incredibly beautiful, incredibly rural and kind of quite high and remote area of northeast Scotland. A place with an incredible history of people, of stories, of whisky making, both legal and illicit, but also a place that's been dealt a really difficult hand across the last 100 years in particular. The First World War having a massive impact upon the place, men and boys going off to battle, and in many cases never returning, either through death on the battlefield or kind of settling elsewhere. And the reality of losing so many men and boys to the area was that it became a really difficult place for kind of families to sustain life and a living, which started a real sustained period of depopulation for the Cabrach, which has been ongoing for the last 100 years, exacerbated by World War II, exacerbated by changes in land ownership and use, to the point where 10 years ago, when the Cabrach Trust was formed, the community as a whole was at a really low ebb. So the Cabrach Trust, in terms of inception, was opportunistic. Our founder and chairman, Grant Gordon, had an opportunity to purchase Inverharrick Farm. And we have 170 acres here. We've got 4 old steading buildings. We've got another collection of small buildings as well. So we had the opportunity to purchase it 10 years ago with the immediate view of owning it as a charitable proposition. The project being community owned, being governed by our community. So trustees brought from the community to support our objectives, to set our strategy. And from the outset, the Cabrach Trust has been about regenerating this community through a number of very interesting ways. The most significant of those being the idea of creating this single malt Scotch whisky distillery in the Cabrach and returning legal distillation to the Cabrach for the first time in 170 years.
And so there was this idea, there was the farm coming along, then there's this idea of renovation, rejuvenation. You then hit a pandemic period. You came on after the pandemic? You got involved with this project and started, I don't really want to say putting your thumbprint on it, but it sounds like maybe enacting what had been in discussion for 8 years or so. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think there had been an incredible body of work, you know, all these ideas across 7-8 years of what we could do as a charitable trust to bring about the change that we all want to see. What does regeneration look like for a community? How is that sustainable? And the idea of placing a distillery at the heart of that sustainability and regeneration journey is beautiful. You know, it's a great idea. But joining the trust in 2021, coming out of the global pandemic, having again felt like the community was at a real low ebb in terms of population, in terms of belief, in terms of shared affinity with the project goals as a whole, it was an opportunity to really kind of either do or don't. You know, are we going to start walking the walk here, or continuing to talk the talk and not necessarily bringing about the change that we're wanting to see?
Sure.
So it was an opportunity to really take stock and hold on to those ideas and bring it into a really robust shape.
So I definitely want to circle back to discussing the distillery that you're working on site here. But Alan, when you and I were up on site, you're pointing off over various hills. Jonathan just now was talking about a history of distillation in this area, this lower Cabrach. Can you talk to that for us a bit? Can you put some leaves on those branches, some distilleries, some history, some production there?
Yeah, well, I love the history of the area, and I love the history of making whiskey wherever it is. But yet here in my back door, I live 8 miles away, down in the capital of whiskey making in Dufftown, but just off the Cabrach. But everybody in the area, everybody in the northeast knows about the Cabrach. They know about this. Oh yeah, it's that area. It's a desolate place. So much of it's above 1,000 feet. But the history of the Cabrach's fascinating. I'm always looking at that map over there. It's a map of emptiness. Well, everybody says it's empty, but it's not. You know, early man was up here. Edward I visited here. An important area, but it's on the edge of the big agricultural parts of Aberdeenshire. It's the Highland Line. It's the Highland Line that whisky set up. As whisky developed and illicit distillation grew, what a great place to make whisky. Here in Glenlivet next door, down over into Brunmar, great place. And then they were smuggling it out to the markets, either through the drove routes, etc. I love walking the mountains, so what's better? But what I'd been brought up with, there's hardly anything left about it. Well, that's not true. If you study the landscape here, there's a lot of illicit distilling. I suppose it's like going to Kentucky and looking for moonshiners, because exactly this is what it was. Jonathan touches on the aims of it, and there was a legal industry here. The reason for it failing is complex, but remoteness is part of it. Yet, when you think Glenlivet is remote, you're going later up the Spey today, that rich, fertile area, which is Spey, which grew barley. We grew barley here, and we're returning barley here to its roots to make whisky. So it's an exciting project to be part of. I'm long past the end of my career, but it's something that I can give something back to, just to give them a hand, etc., and speak about whisky and look forward. You were looking at me when Jonathan says we'll make some fantastic whisky in the back still, and we're saying yes, but we'll use all our expertise to take something from the roots of this area and give it back and open up a style that hopefully will be interesting to folk.
That's great. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about whiskey style in a little bit. I heard you mention some touchstone whiskeys, give people an idea of what may be coming out of these stills. But a few weeks back, Ollie had said, you've got to talk to Alan. Alan, you'll walk around and Alan will just look up in a hill and said, "Oh, that's a place for illicit distilling." You just seem to have this knack for it. And so, a question for you is, looking at this land, is where the distillery is being built? Is it on a spot where distilling had happened previously, legally or illegally?
Most definitely illegally.
Okay.
Everywhere in the Cabrach would have been involved in making whisky at the era.
Yeah.
This is the bicentenary of the passing of the 1823 Distilling Act. In the next few years, as illicit distilling is suppressed, 80 folk will leave this area to go to America, Canada, Jamaica, because there's no opportunities here.
Oh, wow.
The establishment in the legal distilling speaks to the Duke of Gordon encouraging the landowners. Mm-hmm. You look at that map and you just colour it Duke of Gordon in its era, or the Duke of Fife, and they were keen to promote legal distillation. They had aided and abetted for years. They knew it was up here. In the upper Cabrach, some of the farmers paid their rents on time. Where were they getting the money from? They were smuggling whisky to the market. Mm-hmm. One of my favourite stories of the smugglers up here is they took back the newspapers from Aberdeen. You'll know well the Press and Journal. Mm-hmm. Well, the Press and Journal, they took that back, and it told them about the victory against the French in the Napoleonic eras, because that had pushed illicit whisky up, pushed the value it up. So the Duke managed to get some legal distilleries established, and Unfortunately, a lot of them fail, but many of the folk connected with them are connected with the modern whisky industry to this day. So the big export after that was the people down to the establishing of the distilleries in the Speyside area or the Fiddick Valley, etc., etc. So.
Jonathan, you had spoken about the area itself since maybe World War I to now losing just a good number of people, obviously, through war. But I wonder if you could talk about your knowledge of what it was like prior to that and what else has contributed to the loss of community in the area.
Yeah, I mean, as Alan says, the stories of the Cabrach are incredible, and they're stories that revolve around people and families, and this being home for so many for so long. Another project that the Cabrach Trust is leading on is a project called Cabrach Lives, which is looking at the heritage and the diaspora of the Cabrach. You know, you take a walk around the Cabrach and you'll kind of see homes that are still lived in. You'll see more homes that once were. They are derelict. They're nothing but a gable end standing there. Yeah. Sometimes they're nothing but a kind of a planted flower bed that still has flowers coming up in the spring, but no one having lived there for hundreds of years. Yeah. So you can really feel that tangible loss across the community. Yeah. But it was an incredibly tight-knit community as well. One of our oldest residents in the Upper Cabrach, who's actually just recently moved down to sheltered accommodation in Huntly, she remembers growing up in the Cabrach. She remembers looking out her window across the valley, seeing the lights on of neighbours, and that bringing that sense of comfort and security. Yeah. But as decades passed, lights were no longer on, and one by one they went out. So the sense of loss has been very rapid and very real as the place has been depeopled. The contributing factors over and above the First and Second World Wars, again, are quite complex. I suppose there's an aspect of industrial revolution, people leaving rural communities, going to towns and cities. Yeah, sure. And there has been a reversal of that, in part attributable to the pandemic, when people suddenly realised that they could be in a rural setting, working remotely, providing they had Wi-Fi, and it works. So the Industrial Revolution played a part. Changes in land use, as I mentioned, the history would be sort of smallhold subsistence living, crofting. And as land changes, small crofts become small farms that become subsumed into larger farms that in some cases become part of sprawling sporting estates. So a land that once supported 10s, 20s, 30 families now has a principal landowner with a package of sporting, agriculture, renewable projects. So the capacity for that land to support the same population is very different as well. So a whole host of things kind of all within this kind of microcosm in the Cabrach that have conspired against it. Yeah. But the idea that we can stall, reverse, regenerate is incredibly romantic, I'd be the first to say, but also really tangible now as well.
I have read a little bit of when you're talking about the trust aims. I quite like the idea that, I mean, obviously as we're whiskey drinkers, we're starting with a distillery, and that's very exciting. But to me, like you say, when you're driving through, and I've been up in these hills since I was very wee. Yeah, this kind of idea of like huge gaps of space between everything happening. So the future aim that maybe it also would encourage some sort of repopulation and bringing those lights back on in houses, I think is pretty exciting. And I like the idea that we have a sort of vested interest that we can get involved through the whiskey bit first. It's slightly selfish, but it's nice that it's a wholesome and we're giving back to the community attached to it. So yeah, I think it's really exciting. And today being able to walk around the site and see, as you're explaining, we've got sort of structures of buildings but not roofs on buildings. I'm excited to keep coming back here and watching those roofs come on, this lovely Welsh slate that we've talked about, coming back to being able to come and have like a wee cup of tea and a cheese scone, that's very important, and be able to take home a bottle of something is, I think, something as a wider thing I'm really enjoying with the whiskey kind of regeneration in Scotland, that we've got such a sense of heritage and distilleries. When you get to them, we've been here since 1794. The idea that now in my lifetime I can watch these distilleries grow up and so that I can say to future generations, oh, I was at the Cabrach when it was just, we were talking about putting concrete flooring down to hold silos, that kind of, I was there. Let me tell you, we had this thing called the pandemic. We all stayed indoors for a while, and then we decided, we should just start building things. So this is a really kind of an interesting, I think project sounds like I'm underselling it, but I'm really excited to watch it and to have people like Alan, obviously, that have got such a kind of legendary status, also steering the ship a little bit, I think is, really cool. And I will continue to drive this slightly long-winded way back down south through the Cabrach and just enjoy the hills. I always love watching them as we go by. Carefully, obviously. You should be looking at the road when you're driving, not just into the hills seeing, do you think there was distilling up there? Don't do the pointing and driving, kids.
So with all of that beautifully said, can we talk about the whiskey, the plan, the goals, the building, the stills? Talk to us. Details.
That's one for Alan to kick off with, for sure.
Well, the legend of the Cabrach whisky was that it had top billing in the Aberdeen market. We can find that in the Press and Journal. Looking at it, it had top market. Its reputation was good, and we know that because they kept the old names. They kept the Cabrach name. They kept the Buck name as an identity to the Cabrach whisky. The story, it goes smooth as milk and that. That's the only real descriptors we get is when King George asks for the illicit whisky. It's smooth as milk, long and uncorked bottles and unmatured. He speaks about it long in wood, which is always fascinating. The quality of the whisky, of course, is really underpins what Speyside is really about, fruity floral sort of style of whisky. What was the whisky like in the Cabrach? We just have inklings of that, but we know that their only fuel here was peat. So there's a hint to that. You drove in over from Dufton today. As you come over, you look to the back. To the left and to the right is where the Dufton distilleries took their peat. Balvenie, Glenfiddich, Mortlach took their peats from there. So there's something in that we would like to explore. Probably we want to explore sorts of other parts of it. We looked at the equipment and the style they were making. They were low yielding in that time. We had the early records of the distilleries, but I think we want to root the style in the traditional style, which will be Speyside, but we'll look at things. So we've given the flexibility to the process that we're going to use local grains here. We're going to use worm tubs. So
that's a buzzword for this podcast.
So we're going to use worm tubs, but the way you use the worm tub is important in making the spirit, how you run it, etc. Because we've had endless debates about that, where distillers will never agree in one subject. We will have different views and different things, and we're going to look. We have wooden fermenters. The other thing is we did archaeological work. The Cabrach Trust supported the archaeological dig at Black Middens Distillery, where we see what's there and with a hint of what they were up to there. So that's going to play to one of the stills within this operation.
I love that whiskey constantly does this paradox of looking backwards and forwards at the same time. You said Black Midden, so what we've done, but we're also going forward, like we're going to put that in. And you've mentioned a few times, both of you, the Buck Still, which is a throwback to this idea of maybe slightly testier times of making whiskey. Could you maybe expand on that?
Yes, well, the archaeologists and the historians that looked at it seemed to think that the Buck ran with one pot still. The 1823 Distilling Act says that you should have two, the wash still and the low wines and faint still. But we do know that there is evidence that some of them were so small that they asked for that sort of concession, so it was given. So we're wanting to play with that idea here, where we do the wash distillation, produce the low wine, and then subsequently distill the low wines and then the faints in the second distillation. So we've got a small still, direct fired with a worm tub. So we're wanting to play with that and see what it's done.
You're saying all the right words. All the padcost listeners are picking up. Small stills, some worm tubs on the go, direct fire. So this is sounding tasty already.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah. Remember, I was a larger distiller as well, so I can always say, oh yeah, a big still, lots of copper contact, etc. But these early distilleries, were the rush that came after the 1824 Distilling Act, all started in very humble beginnings, like where we will be at this point in our journey. So that's going to be interesting to look back to see how they dealt with scale at that time. I think you're very right. I think one of the fascinating things, we're going to innovate, but we're going to look back in the history books to get the clues from some of these things. We'll probably be saying, oh, well, that didn't work, but we've tried this and found it, and they maybe did this. And that has been my journey in distilling all over the years.
But I think that's part of a given, though. I don't think... I think it's pretty unreasonable for you to have gone through all the huge amount of work we're seeing happen here and expect you to get it bang on first time. In fact, I think we'd maybe all be a little bit disappointed if you just came in, hit it on the nose, and from day one started smashing out the park. Like, we want to feel like we've come on a journey with you. And part of the learning about what your equipment and what you're doing, and especially if you're looking to make it, local sourced ingredients, I think there's a tolerance within whiskey to allow for you to learn. So yeah, I
think there's a really honest curiosity there as well, because it's curiosity about what it might look like and taste like, and it's curiosity about how it might operate in the very worst of a Cabrach winter. And it's curiosity about who's going to engage in the story in the way that we kind of hope that they will, in terms of hearts and minds. And the curiosity kind of underpinned actually kind of being drawn to the project as well. It's a really beautiful idea. It's quite a brave idea, and it was definitely unproven. So the curiosity of that was actually amazing as well.
That takes me back to the story when I started in the whisky industry and a young guy. I'd had a couple of years and I was onto production, onto shifts, and we're cleaning these spirit stills at Glenlivet, that's where I started, and they're massive pot stills, and you had to clean them every week because they're direct fired. So you had to scrub it, and I'm in and I've got the hose and I'm hosing the top of the inside of the still, and the old stillman took my arm. He says, don't do that. He says, you'll upset the flavour of the whiskey.
There you
and
go.
I says, God, here we go again. These old traditions, etc. And I remember a few years later, we had a compound that we were looking at, and the boffins looked at it and they says, don't upset the patina of the top of the still. And I says, my old colleague knew what he was speaking about, and maybe didn't understand the science. So and I've got that in my back of the head, thinking we're going to try this one distillation. There's 2 distillations in one still. I'll be fascinated to see what that produces.
Being careful with your caustic and the scrubbing. Yeah,
exactly.
So I've got 2 questions, seeing as we're talking about the buck, this particular still. When you took us out to the site, the first thing we did is we put helmets on, we got our high-vis jackets on. And you're talking about a still that is direct fired. I can't think of many distilleries beyond Glenfarclas, and Springbank has one of their stills direct fired. Is there an extra step you've got to go through to get permission to direct fire your stills, which is something...
It has to fulfil health and safety requirements, etc. The zoning around the still, etc. That's the sort of thing. But
so there's no extra layer. It's not an issue. You're just ticking boxes and making sure you're safe.
Your risk assessments of etc. of that. You're introducing a flame into a still house.
Yeah, exactly.
But, there was a lot of experience. The guys had a lot of experience of that in the past. But it's this cooking the copper of the still, which is important. We think is important to reproduce that style of what the buck would have produced, what the old guys would have produced.
So with that in mind, in conjunction with the worm tub, So you said you had some back and forth on how to operate this. Can you go into what that back and forth was and where you finally fell with it, or if you have finally fallen with it? Obviously, it's not installed yet.
Well, I always say it in my long experiences is some of all my mistakes, so I think I'm picking up on that. The worm is fascinating. The industry didn't throw out all the worm tubs, and I know because we did lots of experiments with condensers and worms at certain distilleries. But what you pick up from if I use one of the distilleries I worked at, the fruity floral style, the area was very short of water, so the worms were probably run quite warm in the past. So when you run it warm, you're trying to recreate, so you give more copper contact, you use the warm water. So that it's that manipulation. I was up at Brora on an Institute of Brewing and Distilling tour to look at the new Brora.
Okay.
And you will see that Diageo's put temperature probes at all heights of the worm. So you know what they're up to there. You know that they are examining that. So that they can recreate the style of the old Brora, etc. Because that is one of the first things. You used to hear the old guys speak about winter and summer spirit, or winter or spring spirit, because the temperatures are different. So making a large volume single malt, it's all about consistency. And that was driven by the chief blenders because they wanted to pick up that style of spirit and say, that's what that distillery is famed for, or what are they making this week? That was the no consistency. But the beauty of the last few years is that we're looking at all these idiosyncrasies of these different distilleries. You know, you'll hear stories about them not cleaning this, but cleaning that.
Of course.
That's the fun. But it was... What I've spent a lot of my career is trying to understand that to produce a consistent spirit.
So where are you? Are you thinking colder water so that you're getting less copper contact, warmer water so you're getting more copper contact?
We'll be looking at the style of spirit and then working it back as well. We will go for a temperature and then we will wind back.
Okay.
The noses will do that.
So we're focusing on the buck still here, but this is only one portion of what's going on in the still house. Jonathan, when we were up there in person, you talked us through the footprint. Would you do that for us again here for our listeners, please?
Yeah, so the footprint, I mean, on the back, you know, there is a brilliant story there and there's going to be something interesting there, but it's probably a fraction of kind of the overall production that we have in mind for the distillery as a whole. We'll have what you could describe as a small but fairly standard wash still, 2,500 litres, spirit still, 1,800 litres, 6 wooden washbacks, a half-ton mash, kind of supporting the majority of kind of Cabrach production. And the hope is that kind of when all those things are working together, once we've commissioned the plant, we're producing maybe around about 100,000 litres of alcohol per year. So tiny in the grand scheme of things. And again, we've not kind of looked at the fine detail, but probably one of the smallest distilleries operating in Scotland. But that needs to deliver a couple of things for us. You know, it needs to deliver sufficient volume to deliver some of the commercial objectives, which are central to our regeneration vision that the Cabrach Trust holds so dearly. But we also want to recognise that with such low volumes, we can really speak intimately about ingredients and batches and bottlings and speak to a really engaged, interested, whiskey geekery audience who really want to know forensically all of these strands of detail, and that kind of gets quite exciting as well. You know, beyond process, you then get into the realms of maturation and wood and taking sort of breadcrumbs from history and applying that into our maturation policies. You know, the stories of kind of Cabrach whiskey going over the drove roads on pack horses in tiny little anchor casks, which would probably be the equivalent of kind of octaves or quarter cask these days. What role does that have in our maturation policies? And then where does that sit in our tiny little dunnage warehouse? These are all, again, just kind of fascinating questions, but again, really important points of interest.
And then you're talking about some barley from on-site, but if you're working or you're running distillation 46 weeks a year, the field that we passed this morning might give you 4 weeks of production, but you were talking about potentially drawing from other farms in the Cabrach, and then potentially beyond that as well. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. So we're really interested in the idea of kind of like full traceability. Again, is that one of your buzzwords?
The concept, I don't know if would we call it traceability? There's another word that in the whiskey world is somewhat contentious that I don't know.
Add it to the list.
Yeah, traceability. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
You've given yourself a new tick. Hold on.
So we're really exercised by that idea, and we're testing the ground as we speak. So Inverhaddock Farm, in terms of recent history, the last 50, 60, 70 years, heavily grazed mostly by sheep, so there hasn't been a crop regime here for a long time. And last year we planted a break crop. This year we planted what we hope is going to be our inaugural crop of malting barley, which is still in the field behind us.
What's a break crop?
So essentially, because the ground had been grazed for so long, we want to grass. It would take a moment to kind of get the soil in a condition ready to receive a kind of a barley crop. So we actually put in neeps, turnips.
Oh, brilliant. Yes.
Which serves to kind of break up the ground.
Just for the sheep, or were you making soup?
Just for the sheep.
It's a 50-50 wrestle.
Yeah. So, and again, once obviously the turnips have come through, we can then put the sheep back in, and they can kind of graze off the neeps across the winter, but they're breaking up the soil, they're adding their own sort of contributions to the soil at the same time. So when we came to plough it this spring, the ground's in far better condition. We've actually put some natural kind of energy into the soil, and we're getting it ready to receive that inaugural sowing of barley at Inverhaddock. And the field's looking good. We're probably, because we're higher, we're kind of behind where kind of, Speyside, Dufton is in terms of harvest, but we're hopefully harvesting that first crop of Inverhaddock barley in the next few weeks. And as you say, we'd anticipate that supporting about a month's campaign of production next year. And that's probably as much barley as we can do at Inverhaddock. And again, we're a small farm, but we're also a very hilly farm, as you've seen. So the idea beyond that is, could we have a really interesting, intimate growers group of local farmers, of local growers who are contributing, a month's worth of barley for a specific campaign of production? Could we have the lower Cabrach contribution, what's coming from the upper Cabrach, what's coming from further down the Devon Valley? And that's something that we're kind of in the middle of conversations about. All these things are happening all at once, the kind of the managing the build program, the doing the sort of the company startup, the identity, the story, the supply chain. So there's all these amazing live conversations all at once. The idea of having this really close-knit growers group which supports these unique campaigns across different seasons is a wonderful idea, and we kind of feel like we're on the edge of kind of delivering that with Inverhaddock leading the way.
I'm guessing Jess and Josh are going to have some more questions along that one, and I'm not going to step on any toes here, but I love what you're saying with break crop there. I love what you're saying about the soil. One of the things we've done in season 7 is we've talked more agriculture and soil and protection and roots and fertilizing, right? And so you're saying the sheep are donating also. Just as a slight aside, we were talking over coffee, you used a word and then you kind of walked away from it, so I'm not looking to hold you to it, but the idea of rewilding, you've talked about the trails. Can you talk a bit about how you see this land and this kind of return to something? I don't want to say wild, because there is a bit of farming going on here and there's a bit of distillation going on here, but how do you view the land and what do you want to achieve with the land across those 170 acres?
Yeah, I think the word kind of harmony probably kind of stands out. We want to deliver the combined project in harmony with the Cabrach landscape. and in respect of everything that remains in the Cabrach. So farming and agriculture has been part of the Cabrach for centuries, and it's not our kind of mindset or our approach that we're going to just transform Inverhaddock Farm into this kind of forested wilderness with lynx scuttling around the hillside.
Yeah.
That's definitely not in our thinking. So it's the balance of can we create this small distillery and visitor destination in the Cabrach whilst honouring and respecting the agricultural roots of the area and maintaining a really close relationship with our farmer who's farmed the land in the Cabrach for 5 generations. But also, how do we recognise that some of this land is degraded, it's depleted? It's a really important river catchment, the River Devon. The River Devon origins are in the Cabrach before flowing down through Banffshire to Macduff and Banff. But actually, it's a river that is a prime habitat for wild Atlantic salmon, which is, of course, kind of a key species under significant pressure just now. So other things that we've been doing whilst readying the site and the farm for supporting a distillery has been how we look at the kind of the overall health of Inverhaddock and the Cabrach. So we have put in a series of nature trails, which is about community asset. So if you're wanting to come to the Cabrach and go for a lovely walk in a safe place where you can safely park and not worry about being chased off the land, you've got it here with our Discovery Trail. But we've also pulled fence lines back from the river courses, so we're no longer in a situation where sheep are poaching water from the riverbank, contributing towards riverbank erosion. We've introduced a programme of planting. So we've so far put in 3,000 native broadleaf trees, which were planted by volunteers. Last year, we put in 1,200 willow. We've kind of created some wet habitats with 2 nature ponds. We've created wildflower meadows. We've put in a nature hide on the banks of the Devon as well, which delivers education. It delivers shelter when it rains. But equally, we've used that space as a really interesting kind of dramming room. When needs be. So the kind of the delivering this project in harmony with the natural environment, recognising our responsibility to making good decisions about input energy, recycling, co-product offtake, tree planting, water extraction is all part of the mix of making good decisions that make sure this is not just a history project here. This needs to work with the context of climate emergency firmly in mind as well.
Well, and on the idea of growing and soil and harmony, I really like the inclusion of that word. Alan, you were talking about barley was grown in this area. Barley is grown in this area. Oats were grown in this area. One of the things we've talked about environmentally is rye, the value of rye. We didn't talk about it outside, but is rye in your lens, in front of your... He's rubbing his chin. Should I say what I'm not allowed to say?
I'm not sure if there was a lot of rye growing up here. It's more down into the lower areas.
Okay.
And I've been fascinated to see the return to rye.
Right.
Speaking to the guys that have used it, they're saying it was something we did speak about earlier, that the modern varieties are different. Because one of the gentlemen I spoke to says, I looked at my father's records, the rye wasn't a great yield and crop, but he found that with his modern knowledge that he could maximise that. So it's fascinating to see, because rye in America was always considered a sort of poorer crop.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But then everybody went for high yield and starch producing because we were distillers. We want yield. But yes, there's a look at that. Of course, we'd have to call it a grain whiskey up here, but it's something. Sure. But malted rye should it have a different connotation?
You definitely listen and learn, though. You kind of look across to kind of Cabrach Laddie as a great example, and the network of farmers that they're working with over there, and recognising that they putting in rye as a break crop, but actually using that to do a very limited production run and an associated release. It's quite interesting. So where we take huge sort of inspiration from the history and heritage of the Cabrach, I think we're right to kind of like look around and, we spoke about Rassay earlier on and Cabrach Laddie, and take learning from these incredible places that are doing things in a really interesting way as well.
Yeah, I was also thinking the practical terms that the distillers and certainly the brewers that I know, when you talk about rye, they pull a side eye and they go, it's a bit of a nightmare.
Sticky in the mash.
Pain in the bum to work with.
But you learn about that. Because I worked for Seagram, and Seagram, when they had the Illinois plant, Lawrenceburg, Illinois, they developed so much into the rye, but they ended up coming to Europe for some of that rye.
Yeah.
You know, they were looking for a style of rye. So.
And then my long-term favourites, Kira, in Finland do 100% malted rye, and it's funny what a totally different product that is to, in my head, when you look at like American rye, if I'll sidetrack us for a second. So yeah, the idea that maybe you could do like a Cabrach and kind of inspired, but you're right, we would have to call it in Scotland, it would have to just come as a grain.
Yeah, that's something that might need looked at by the
you guys don't seem like you have enough to do, so if you just pop that on your list of just get some legal definitions of whiskey changed whilst you're busy.
We'll get that one up on the whiteboard.
It's the top of the list, easy peasy. That'll be a quick fix. So.
But your evidence, you go round about Speyside, you see the word rye appear in farm names, so it was more
maybe
prominent
it was there.
here. Yeah. There's the evidence again. You know?
Yeah, definitely. It's I guess maybe as well as whiskey drinkers, as we're becoming much more conscious about what you are. It's not just going to the shop picking up the thing that your dad or your, I don't know, I guess maybe in the future I'll be able to say my auntie used to drink, and people have much more interest. So something like what's happening here is so important because you can come and see it happening. It's a touchable, tangible thing to get involved in. So it's not just a liquid that goes in a glass. So maybe that's, you could add that into the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're saying that about what your father, what your grandfather drank. Father drank blended whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah. When malt started, I suppose malt whiskey, we always knew where it came from. It came from the distillery. I was brought up that the distilleries were branded in the sense that I come through Craigellachie, it's now John Dewar, that used to be White Horse. Yeah. You come up, Queen Anne used to be Benriach, but now it's... Yeah. I don't know where Queen Anne is just now. I think it still sits with Seagram, but you had identity to the distillery, but then the single malt came. I started in a distillery that was selling a little bit more each year as single malt. Thought was providing the malt whiskey for blending. I thought that Johnny Walker was all made at Duluth, but
right. And if you ask people where I live, they'll tell you, because they're so attached to Kilmarnock.
That guys would have been drinking Johnny Walker.
Yeah. We were talking about that actually as we drove up the road a couple of days ago. We were passing through Perthshire and obviously past Aberfeldy, and it isn't labelled as Aberfeldy, it's John Dewar's World of Whiskey.
Yes, that's
and
right.
then to the whiskey nerds, they add in brackets at the end, Aberfeldy.
A few years back, Jason and I were talking with John McClellan, formerly of Kilchoman, sadly passed now. Almost 6 years now, I think. Yeah. But when he joined Kilchoman, he came from Bunnahabhain, and for him it was easy, right? It was Kilchoman was about a tenth the size of what he had been working on with Bunnahabhain. Are you taking that same approach? Having cut your teeth in Glenfarclas, and then, of course, Glenlivet, your name is synonymous with, how much of that are you bringing here?
We used to say that the smallest distillery had the biggest problems, but that's just, as an aside. But what it is, even when you've got a small distillery, you have to apply everything that a big distillery applies. Though in a bigger company, the roles will get split up. The smaller operation, I know that the team that will be recruited for here, they will have to be able to do everything, understand everything, understand the maturation as well. You're going into it in the bigger company. The chief blender will have a big say in what you're doing. So it's very satisfying working. And I've worked in both scales, as you've said. And I think that. But the distillery has to apply the same microbiology. It's all that has to fit into place as well. But we've been speaking about the trust and that the team that's built up around that supports the distillery advisors, a lot of knowledge as well. And the blend in there is quite amazing. So we call in a lot of experts as well. And I think most of the board have worked in different parts of the whisky industry, so it's fascinating.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk about the people involved and where they came from, because I think there's some significant names behind this besides yourselves.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of forever feel incredibly fortunate with the arms that are wrapped around this project with me, because I don't know whether you picked up or not, but like, I don't come from the world of whiskey. You know, I've spent a career and a life in not-for-profit, in the charitable sector, working with communities, working with young people and all those things. So actually immersing myself in this project has been incredible learning, massively supported by the non-executive board of directors, the distillery advisory group, the wider industry, which recognise that we're doing something not in competition to them, but something which is part of their story as well in terms of the origins of malt whisky. And there is amazing people. Alan, of course, Master of Malt for the board. We've got Grant Gordon, who's our founder and chair at the Cabrach Trust and also a non-exec for the Cabrach Distillery. And he's part of the senior family at William Grant & Sons. Our chairman for the distillery, Glenn Gribben, chief executive at Bladenoch, previously head of global marketing for the Macallan. So from a commercial point of view, I don't think we could find anyone any better. and he's such a joy and a knowledge to work with. Laura Anderson, a lifetime within the spirits industry, real financial acumen. So we've kind of got a really good board sitting behind the distillery. But as I said, you know, the wider support of the industry, from senior process engineers to the expertise that Forsyths have down in Rothes, has been unbelievable and has challenged us. They've been critical friends, they've been supporters. Really, really fortunate.
Yeah, it's just when you're talking about the people involved in it, it's funny if as something that's kind of maybe locally very big, and like you're saying, you've talked about the trust when it was formed for the first few years maybe wasn't progressing at the speed at which you're moving now. It's funny hearing it as someone who lives a little bit further down the country, not quite as far away as these two, but maybe not having heard so much. And when I started looking into what was happening here, there's so much. It's like I said, it's not just the distillery, but it's really exciting to hear that it feels like all the right people with the right names and dynasties that are involved in this. I think it's going to be an exciting project to continue following, but also I would be slightly intimidated if I decided I was going to be applying here for a job. Look at the ranks you're coming to be a member of.
After a while you'll know that it's the same old stories that we come out with. You know, well, here's Alan with his old stories again.
I've always been fascinated, and I've joked for a long time about I would love to go around like we're doing here, just sitting and having conversations about people who have lived in these hills and really experienced life in and out of the industry, and the way it's very hard to be in Speyside and not, you know, even if you're just driving around, you're passing distilleries, you're passing fields of barley. It's very hard to escape what the industry is connected and so deeply rooted here. I've always wanted to sit in like the Fiddich side in and just sit with a microphone and sidle up to some of these old boys and get them to tell me stories. But I feel like the mics would have to be off because people are still, you know, there's generations working in distilleries, and some of the cheeky monkey stories I love to hear maybe are not ready to be released on wax for several decades.
I recognise that, yeah.
That it's not hard to trace people back through, but some of the stories and the seams of history that are up here are just endlessly fascinating to me, and I love that you guys are kind of bringing that to life.
That's interesting you say that, because my friend Colin, who just lives down the road here, Colin was an architect abroad, but his great-grandfather was Peter Mackenzie, the manager at Glenlivet Distillery. And further back, he was the Mackenzies. It was called Illicit Distilling up at Glenlivet. And Colin has a great fascination. And we started looking for illicit stills. And then folk would say, where were you walking? Oh, I was up in the Cabrach looking for the illicit stills. Oh, yeah. And we even had that because I was a day shiner, distiller. Father was a policeman. It wasn't the person who would tell any stories about illicit distilling. But it's amazing how the stories have came out, and that's the beauty of the Cabrach lives. They're capturing that. And they're beginning to open up now, you know, maybe there's not as much illicit distilling.
No comment. No comment.
The whole big sizeman doesn't visit my shed, you know. But no, that it was funny how that stories were kept. It's in the oral tradition. It's not written down, and that's so annoying that nobody wrote down. My great grandfather didn't write down, oh, I did a bit of illicit distilling.
Of course not.
Or at that field or that thing. So the stories I've got, but the Cabrach, it seems to be quite living, and it seems to have been passed down quite a bit. That where it was up at Alduni, it's Alduni up in the Cabrach. The newspaper, he says, I could see 14 illicit stills from my house. And we thought, we'd found this, and we were told there was nothing. And you know, this would be beginning to pick them up and find their locations. There's good distilling sites, but then you find this walled feature in the landscape. So that fascinates me. But that's story. Yeah, once the microphone's off, I'll tell you all my naughty stories.
sorry guys, all the good stuff didn't make the cut. As well, for me, it's not just the stories, it's the actual, like you're saying, it's orally, it's passed down, it's not by writing. For me, it's the actual voices. So sometimes that's problematic because in an audio format, some of the accents up here, if you're not used to them, would probably need subtitles. As somebody who spent a large chunk of their childhood here, despite the fact my accent doesn't match it, I can follow Doric pretty well, and I love hearing these stories. I know Balvenie did do a project, Gemma was working on it for a while, like the actual, not just the stories, but it's the voices telling these stories. So I love and I miss, because Glasgow is a totally different set of accents and different dialects, but there's something about up here, it's so much part of my childhood that listening to not only the stories, which are hilarious and can't go on the podcast, but it's the actual voices telling them to me, that's one of the things that continually draws me back to whiskey. It's all about stories and sharing experiences, sitting around like we are now with a dram, not with a dram, and I think Speyside to me is particularly special because it's so rich in it. So that's maybe one day I'll get my, I don't know, I'll just have to start hanging around in bars out here. I hope that people
twist your arm.
People look at me and they're like, she's really weird, she's just listening to us at the next table.
But I think to the very point you're making, Jess, is as we're sitting here with Jonathan and Alan, you're both talking in ways where that next farm means something. It's people who live there. Over that hill, there's other farms, and that's people over there. And coming to the Cabrach and sitting here today, I feel like it's alive, listening to you, talking to you. And I hope the people listening to this podcast, those who are into whiskey, will have that opportunity to come here and see this being alive and real and filled with humans. Like that's, I'm starting to get excited, and I hope other people get that experience coming out here as well.
I think that's what Dave Broom picked up with his two books, the Japanese one and Spirit of Place.
Sense of Place.
Yeah, but there is a bit more to it than the actual building. There is that part of it. And also, as a distiller and being local, I often picture a distillery with the folk that work at it, or the folk that's involved in it. And that's how I see a distillery. But then you can see the historic parts of it, you know.
Yeah.
And we always look to see who we're all related to, you know. We're no different from Kentucky here.
Different accent, same,
But I think that's a really important point about how people will potentially begin to engage with the Cabrach and identify it as a place that they're interested in, or they want to visit, or they want to kind of have some kind of connection with. And we certainly see the distillery, you know, being part of it, but not the be-all and end-all. Because I think you can't really understand the loss that's been experienced by the community unless you go and stand at the War Memorial in the Lower Cabrach, or go up to the Upper Cabrach Church and stand at the graveside and see kind of generations of Sheeds and Gordons and McBains who have called this place home. Read the sign that recognises the Cabrach as one of the largest war memorials in the world in terms of per capita loss.
Wow.
See those buildings we spoke about earlier, this kind of derelict, lonely gable ends in a barren strip of land, you know, the kind of like the sense that you get from actually visiting the Cabrach Distillery but setting out on foot or taking a drive around the Upper Cabrach, you know, just gives you a real kind of feeling for the place with, you know, that Buck Hill, that landmark hill kind of standing proud from pretty much anywhere you can see.
I was going to say, maybe this is the start of... It's funny how we're talking in kind of almost two like emotions to it, I think. You're talking about the loss and especially the impact that the war had. And then what's happening here is almost, I feel like you're sort of trying to convey a joy being breathed back into the environment. And so that eventually when we're, I don't know, some numbers of years down the line and we've got more buildings established and there are things happening, this idea of like life and joy coming back to the area and maybe people being drawn into that to start that building even more. I think you're right. When you drive around places and it's the same. I grew up in the Dales. Like you see these buildings that just kind of crumble away to nothing. It's quite. I've always felt they're sort of quite sad looking, like very artistic, very great for an Instagram picture. Sort of like ramshackled shepherd's hut, which has just fallen away into the hill. But you, I guess when you actually start thinking about like why that, it's not because we decided to move into prefabs in the city centre. There's a drive that has pushed people into that. So yeah, the idea that we're kind of restoring and bringing colour back to an area which is ridiculously beautiful. Like the whole of the Cabrach is just a series of postcards. This is what I tell people Scotland looks like 100% of the time. The idea that we could maybe get people to come and experience it for themselves is certainly an exciting future for
But there is, I mean, like that idea of Renaissance is amazing, and the distillery will do part of that. But you know, last July we had our Cabrach Picnic and Games, Highland Games, which used to be, 87 years ago, the highlight of the sporting and community calendar, and it stopped, disappeared. And then the idea of, well, why can't we put it back on? Let's see if people will come. It'll be low key, maybe 50 folk will turn out, and 250 came.
That's amazing.
And we had to cater for them. And then this year we thought, we're taking it back after 87 years. Why not restore it as part of that annual calendar? So we scaled up a little bit. We created a bit more space, and we had over 500 people come this year as well.
Magic.
So again, in terms of kind of the idea that this decline, the depopulation is inevitable, it needs challenged, and it needs challenged in various ways that all connect together. So whether it's whiskey, or whether it's the Highland Games, or whether it's tree planting, or whether it's education with school groups who come up here, fall into the river, do everything they shouldn't do, but have a real experience. It's all those things combined that contribute to that sort of rejuvenation and renaissance of a place.
Yeah. That's a really cool thing to be part of.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a question before, but I think you've answered it. And the question was simply, do you feel the weight upon you as you're bringing all of this back here? Repeopling it, as you said, and it's clear. You can hear it in the passion in your voice, right? Bringing Highland Games back, right? Bringing distilling back, bringing people back here. It seems very, very special and very personal to you both, and I'm sure to your whole team. Yeah,
without question. From my point of view, it's more than a job.
Yeah,
but in equal measure, people. Volunteers like Alan, like our trustees, our non-executive board, giving up so much of their own time, their expertise, their talent, all because of the social purpose that sits around this project. That's utterly humbling. Not without sleepless nights, for sure. Budget lines are the same, whether social purpose or not, but all absolutely worthwhile. And kind of, as we said, at times hard work, but also kind of quite poetic.
Yeah, fantastic. So, listen, we're right about our hour spot here, but I wonder if you could quickly just share with our listeners, our readers. The transcript. The transcript is coming. Yep. Yes, on PDF. Just share with them, your general understanding of when you think liquid may be flowing from your stills, when you might be able to receive visitors, and websites, anything that you want to share with them so they can invest some of their own time in what you're doing.
Great. You want to go first?
Yeah, well, the website has to be changed. It's 2024. We hope to start production, but yeah, we hope to start early next year. As we've said, the equipment's ready.
Yeah.
The building, once the roofs are on, we will. I'm sure that we'll move at quite a pace then, and hopefully harvested the grain, malted the grain, and be ready for the spring, and then.
Yeah, so we've got various kind of warm-up projects before we're actually distilling, which are an important part of viability from a business point of view, but also community building for this new distillery as well. So we are going to have what we're calling our Cabrach Collective, which will be our very small founders club, people who are kind of really buying into the story, the concept, the idea, the social purpose really early. By becoming a member of our collective, you'll lock in one of those first bottles of Cabrach single malt. Nice. You'll get special news, you'll get special access. But we're also doing something else quite interesting on your liquid question, which again, I suppose embodies the support that we're experiencing from the wider Speyside distillery industry. So we're doing a very limited edition blended single malt scotch across 3 editions, born of cask donations from the distilleries that sit around the Cabrach. We've got beautiful identity and name and story which sits around this, which you'll hear about soon.
I was excited. That was halfway to being a very exclusive.
We also kind of have, I suppose, whiskey that we would recognise you'd rarely find in a bottle together. Will be in a bottle together, and as you might imagine, the kind of the marrying, the vatting process will be watched over closely by Alan Winchester, who will put his name to every bottle as well. So we've got this 3 editions of this blended Speyside single malt, which will be available for our Cabrach Collective members, but it will also be available for sale, but as a way of paying homage to what we're trying to do here. Liquid before we've got Cabrach single malt to enjoy. And as I said, it's a really good example of how the Speyside industry recognises what we're trying to do here and is very tangibly supporting it
together. That's great. It's great for Speyside.
It's that really identifies the Speyside sort of spirit, and also the companies have generously donated to us. So that's pressure putting that together. Building a distillery is easy.
Where can people get information on the collective? Because it sounds like something that we across the table from you certainly want to be a part of. I'm sure our listeners do too.
No, brilliant. So we're kind of right in the final throes of web design for the Cabrach Distillery. We obviously have a website for the Cabrach Trust, but that's a very different organisation from the Cabrach Distillery once we get it up and running. So the Cabrach Distillery will have its own website, will have its own brand and identity, which again, we've worked really closely as a group together to make sure it's right in terms of tone of voice, story, look and feel. So website going live in the autumn, with the launch of our Cabrach Collective at the same time as well, and then our limited edition Speyside malt concept coming out in the new year, with a view to then first distillation May, June time next year, and then we're on that road to kind of restoring real Cabrach whiskey in the years to follow.
Excellent. So you're saying autumn as in this one that we're right on the doorstep of, so we can start following you as soon as possible.
100%, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your gracious time today and for hosting us here and welcoming us with a cup of coffee.
Not at all. Might have a whiskey the next time.
Next guy gets it.
I knew you were driving.
Right, we'll be back. We'll be back.
It's a pleasure seeing you all here, coming to see us in the Cabrach.
Amazing.
It gives you the feeling of it, which is
Absolutely.
great. Hopefully we can convey that to you. Enjoy the rest of your trip in Speyside.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I look forward to hearing about the rest of your trip in the podcast.
That was a really excellent time spent with Alan Winchester, Jonathan Christie, the Cabrach, the whole experience there. We learned a ton. Project to follow going forward.
Are you sure Cabrach?
Cadenheads?
Cabrach.
It's all Hebrew. It's all Hebrew to me.
Let's call the whole thing off.
So listen, we do have emails to read, but we have some really important news that I wanted to bring out to our listeners.
I'm going to be honest, Joshua, I did not bring my PDFs to Elgin, and so I do not have emails to read.
Disaster.
Did you bring your portable data files,
They
formats?
were supposed to be overnight FedEx Expressed.
Oh,
But due to Brexit,
gosh.
they are lost somewhere
Wow.
in the chain.
Man, oh man, Ashevitz.
Well, I'll tell you what, since you're here, why don't you wake up the paperboy and we'll talk ROW5.
Is there a traditional way to wake up the paperboy? Do I jab him in the eye? Do I just give him a little shake like, hey buddy, could you...
I just sweep the leg, usually.
Set fire to his toes.
God! First of all, you sweep his
Fire to his toes.
So you just
warm them with a
Your
match.
poor boys. How are you raising these
Your
kids?
kids.
Hey,
I'm
they never missed
concerned.
the school bus, I'll tell you that much.
I'm concerned that Josh has got him sleeping upright in a house somewhere to sweep his leg. If you're lying down, that doesn't work, right?
Sweep the leg. Sweep the leg.
Okay, hello paperboy, please wake up.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble!
Okay, well now he's fully awake.
We're fully awake. Holy moly.
Oh boy.
What a pitch.
Look, that's just how we do it here in Elgin. So I'm assuming that you said we have important news. I'm going to assume this is ROW5.
Absolutely.
Can we
This is
just pause really quickly right there? This is our 5th
Yeah.
release for ROW, the rest of the world.
rest of the world.
That's a lot. That's
fun.
very cool.
Yeah.
Right? That is fun.
We are. We're doing it.
We're moving ahead.
Doing it
I
live.
love it. Yeah. So sorry. Please,
Even
please
with
continue.
the global logistics situation,
Exactamundo.
we're doing it anyway.
We're doing it.
That's just how we
It
rock.
just
Yeah.
feels pretty great. So thank you, Jess.
I'm
for
so
all
excited.
You do.
I do find ROWs a little bit like buses, where we're about to have 2 this year, and people waited all of 22. There's that number again to get to 23. Now we got 2 and 23. So boom.
I'm going to say that's how you drive people's interest, Jason. That's how we pique their interest. Like, oh, another little release coming. Cheeky, cheeky.
Do you know what I'm going to say right now?
This is how we do it.
In 2024, we're going to do 3 ROW releases. I've said it. It's
right.
on wax.
I'm
Okay.
very glad that I am sat down at this moment in time.
Yeah.
I just love how much Jason has had to drink. Anyway, so Jess, why don't you go on with...
I'd like to say that up until very shortly ago, Jason was the only one who'd had nothing to drink.
Very shortly ago?
Yep.
Is that true? I'm sorry, Jess.
Very shortly ago.
The man who just spat on himself.
I know, I did it
is
now a second
really
time.
taking the high ground
All
here.
right.
Whole
So-
chunk of glass houses happening over here. Yes, so I have some exciting news. That's why the Paperboy's awake.
Absolutely.
We have some things that are coming to a market shop near you.
We know it's not going to our friends in America.
Sorry, guys.
I see your face. Where are we offering it to?
So we will be offering to obviously some lovely countries that have taken us before. So our friends, obviously, I have been talking about Tel Aviv, so obviously there'll be
Indeed.
Israel's on the list, Germany, Japan. This is not alphabetical. Our Canadian friends who are nearly the borders of the country who are not getting us
There
offered
you
to
go.
them.
Super close, but not all the way.
And, of course, a good chunk of retailers in the UK who have supported us. There'll be a list going out. And if you run a whiskey shop in Fiji and you want to talk to me, then you know where to find me.
Well, there you go.
Or that kind of thing. So, yes, there'll be lots of offers being made. And hopefully, when we are about to go through what's on offer, lots of people coming in being like, yes,
This
give
is
me
it.
these whiskies
Yeah.
This is
and
it.
things.
There you go.
So maybe I'll start with every ROW format we've done. So far, we've had a not whiskey. or several not whiskies.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with our not whiskey. And so we have a rum, a 12-year-old Epris Brazilian rum,
Right.
which is delicious.
That's become an in-house favorite.
Yeah, we
of ours.
brought an Apri to the US for
Yeah.
retail.
Yep.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah,
you
you
are
did.
100% correct. So yeah.
This one is slightly different. The Apri that went to the US was quite piney. I seem to remember when
Yeah.
we sat down and wrote some tasting notes, we felt like it was very seasonally appropriate.
Yeah,
the
it's
idea
like
of a
Christmas wreaths
piney,
or something.
A Christmas rum.
Yeah.
I have
Or
Christmas.
for my fellow Jewish friends, your neighbors who celebrate Christmas reads.
But this one, I feel like it was much more tropically fruity. We talked a lot about bananas. I seem to remember lots of different types of bananas and tropical notes. So yes, again, we're maybe a little bit early for the idea of a
I love
end
that
of the
banana
year
nut,
seasonal rum. But yeah, so there's an Apri,
By the time
12-year-old.
these things go on boats.
Yes, well, that's true. Global logistics situation.
Logistics.
Okay, continuing with our maybe not strictly whiskey. No, it's a not single malt whiskey. We have a 26-year-old Invergordon, which we got. It's in a refill cask, and everybody who has previously purchased from Single Cask Nation or has followed us for a while knows how much we love an Invergordon.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I have not broken the formula here, I think. Delicious Invergordon. Tick.
Some vanilla ice cream notes.
Yeah, I feel like it was lots of that kind of vanilla sugary. When we wrote those notes, we were
Brilliant.
in a confectionery heaven setup, so that's going to be good.
Lovely.
And then I guess we should also talk about our Dalyuen. We have talked about Dalyuen
there we
earlier.
are. Opened it.
So we've got
Back
a
to
slightly... This is a different style to the two that I was pouring in Newcastle, though. Fans of whiskies with colours attached to it will be delighted to drink this Dalyuen.
Oh, this is
our sherry cask.
Yeah, this is refill bourbon into first fill sherry.
Yeah.
PX
Unclear.
Unclear. Okay.
Unclear. Sherry for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
you only need to look at it. There's no hiding from that. I would like to point out here that when we were discussing colour, this is one of my favourite colour notes. We've gone for sanguine copper.
That's it.
Oh, that's a Jason.
That
note.
is.
That's you like the sanguine.
That's it.
I don't know what Dulux colour chart you got that from. So yeah, there's going to be Dalyuen. And then I'm really like ramping up the tension here.
Boom.
We've got our very first Single Cask Nation Ardnamurchan.
Hey.
I love that. I love that. We talk about this all the time. The spirit of collaboration.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Absolutely.
this is a new distillery for us to be collaborating with. And one that I think I've mentioned it on the podcast. They have easily made it into my top 5 distilleries. Period. Their make is fantastic.
I am a big fan. And I also like the crew. They're a great bunch. So
Yeah, I'm really honoured
being
to be
invited
bottling
up
with them.
to Ardnamurchan earlier in the year to pick some little casky casks was a great privilege.
Yep.
Wonderful.
And yet again is an example of me finding a way of making whiskey an excuse to eat food. So I really was only going to Ardnamurchan to get my food provided by Graham, who some of you may know on the old Instas as Yadar Sells Whiskey, whose
Yep.
Insta game for food is unreal.
What's the name?
Yadar Sells Whiskey.
Your dad. Oh, so short for dad. Your dad
like-
sells whiskey.
Instead of Avon, right? Like that
Oh,
insult.
yeah. Instead of Avon.
This is a very Scottish insult. Don't go blank on me.
What's the Scottish insult?
It's like a way of, perhaps being unkind to somebody's parents saying, well, your dad sells Avon. Gosh, listeners and readers of the padcost, there was jet lag occurring there.
Oh my gosh.
Never heard that in my life.
There's so
I
many,
would say
for
I've never
all
heard
our
that in
readers,
cream
there's so
puff.
many typos in that.
So yes, but
Dad sells
Ardnamurchan,
whiskey.
yeah, Graham's food is amazing. So we were let loose in the warehouse, which is a great dangerous sport to play.
Terrific.
We had a little scramble through some casks. And I think whilst we're doing exclusives, I think I'll just pop in here that not one cask was chosen, two.
Oh,
Two Ardnamurchans were chosen.
I was going to sneak that in
sneaky.
afterwards.
And I'm just going to leave that there.
The number of times Jess says to us, I only heard about it on the podcast. Thanks for telling me, chaps. And now today you've delivered unto our listener base / readership
I haven't really.
Here's a little something sneaky up
little
our
something,
sleeves.
something.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not really taking revenge, as I'm telling these things whilst you two are looking me in the eyeballs. It's not a. It's not quite a true
Wait a
revenge.
second. There's an Ardnamurchan for America?
You put a little more whiskey in my glass, Jason. So listen, can you...
Wait.
I feel as if we're getting caught up here, so can you just repeat the first three that you said? And
So
then,
we've got an Apres 12-year-old.
Yep.
We've got an Invergordon 26-year-old.
Good.
We've got a Dalyuan, which I think is 13 years old. Yes, 13 years old.
Oh, the sherry's one,
The
yeah.
Sherry Dalyuan. Our Ardnamurchan will be 6 years old. Would you like to know what that's in?
Yes,
Yes.
That is a little bourbon barrel number, and it
beauty.
is delish.
That one was dreamy. It was so dreamy.
Yeah.
I
So
really loved it.
Unpeated.
Here's my
yep.
little pinpoint. Yeah, unpeated. Here's my little pinpoint here. One of the questions I have been asked recently: how is it decided who gets what casks? And I said, if it's a cask from the UK, I just say it's mine.
That's true. That's actually what happened here.
And that's what happened here. I sent you some samples, and I said you can try this, but I'm having it. So, and you're too kind to argue with me. So
You were the one scrambling over the casks. You
listen.
get first dibs.
In the end, we're going to get a sherried one for the US. I'm okay with that.
And is that peated in sherry?
It's in sherry.
Hey! I see what you did there.
I was just going to leave it as a little kind of hovery point.
Well,
Okay.
I'm feeling generous. Anyway, so continue. You've got one more.
So the one more release, which is going to be in RW5, 5 for 5.
5 for 5.
Everybody knows I'm very
Five.
excited about this, and simultaneously very stressed about this at the time of
Doing
recording.
your Lamaze.
Oh god! See the guys outside who are roaring past our windows, also very excited about this. So for the first time coming to the UK and other ROW establishments, but it will be in the UK physically to be dispatched worldwide.
How many cases are you keeping in the UK?
Shh, it's a very empty cask. Guys, I don't know how to tell you this. I've got a Westland.
And not just any Westland. Let's
Not
talk
any
about
Westland.
this cask.
You
Let's
are
talk about this spirit.
beaming.
I know.
It's like my baby's coming home.
you're literally
Absolutely
glowing.
looks like that.
That's just the lights. It's the amount of iron brew I've consumed today. So our Westland, I'm very excited for many thousands of reasons. First of all, I'm excited because it's a Westland with an age on it, which we don't see much of. So this will be a 9-year-old by the time it hits some beautiful new glassware. And this is a Westland that has had... I never know whether to say finish maturation, second maturation. It's had a decent amount of
I think
time.
second maturation is
Second
perfectly
maturation.
fair.
Given how
here.
long
Yeah,
the
perfectly
second-
fair.
yeah.
It's had a long old break in a Banyuls cask.
Banyuls, right?
Banyuls, so fortified French wine, for those who don't know.
The
Aye.
annual Banyuls manual.
Annual
if
Banyuls
anyone
manual.
remembers the
Bottled by
April
Daniel.
Fools episode.
There you go. Little shout out to Matt Hoffman and Steve Hawley on that one.
Absolutely. Gosh, the whole team. Anna.
The whole team. No, you're right. But Anna Hins, Jason. It's Anna Hins.
Okay.
But the reason why I say that is back to our Westland April Fools.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
With
yes,
the
yes.
Annual, Banyual, Manual.
The
and,
annual, Banyual,
okay.
Manual.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
Selected by Daniel?
Continue on.
Yeah, so I feel like in the UK especially, Banyuls is kind of, you're starting to see it on some labels. There's not a huge amount of whiskies, I think, out in the old Banyuls cask. And so the first time I came across a Banyuls was a Teeling Irish whiskey in a
Yes.
Banyuls.
Yep.
There are, I think, 1 or 2 Bunnahavens in Banyuls.
Okay.
And I suspect there's probably loads that people are now like, oh, it's in... So there's a few that I've tried. I think I will also be checking out some Banyuls wine to just have a little
Absolutely,
look.
yeah.
From the cask of Westland, I am very pleased to say, though, as ever, it's a great balance for me. It's still got bags of Westland happening in there, so it's not all cask, which I talk about quite a lot when we're talking about picking casks. I always look for something that does a full circle. Like if it's in an interesting cask, obviously you want an influence of that in there, but I don't want it to override the whiskey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'd be very sad if I thought the Westland had just been washed away.
Yeah.
But it has not. It is delicious, and it's 9, which is pretty cool.
I remember that having a little bit of cardamom kind of presence,
Yeah.
a little bit of
Yeah.
cinnamon bun
It
going
had
on.
like exotic notes,
Right.
exotic spicy kind of
Actually, a
notes
lot
to
of
it.
Swedish flavours.
There was, funny enough. I don't know if we were just on one when we wrote these tasting notes. Wait, I have to look at my notes here because I think this is possibly the wankiest colour I've ever come up with. I think I was inspired by your
This is you.
copper This is me. I have no one to blame except myself. The colour I
Burnt
have
ochre.
described
Is it burnt ochre?
is Iron Brew dyed koi carp.
Hell yes. Wait, Iron Brew what?
Dyed koi carp.
Koi cut? What? I
You know, like koi carp
You know, the
have that like
orange
the
kind
big
of
fish?
Japanese fish that are in koi ponds.
Koi. Well, so in the U.S. we just call them koi fish, not koi cod.
carp.
Carp.
Koi carp.
Yeah.
Oh, koi carp.
Koi cod you cannot get at a
carp.
fish and
Koi
chip
carp.
shop in Elgin.
Say that 3 times real
You
fast.
cannot get koi cod. Do not go asking for a koi cod supper in Elgin. It will not work.
I would pay you to do it though, just to watch from outside the window.
So, okay. Oh, I like that note. That's very...
like
or
that
not
too.
note, but color. That's very
So
cool.
we definitely chewed over this nose for ages. This has got a great nose on it. I could smell it forever. So I will share you a few of the little notes, the inner working of our mind as we
Yeah.
were writing these notes. So we have attention grabbing and bold nose with a fresh lumberyard, which is also milling aromatic spices. Think cardamom.
That was 100% you. Yep.
If you charge the senses from within the glass, but hang around, there's a freshly ground coffee to be found as well at this very strange lumberyard.
Becoming very Swedish.
But it's clear that's Jess's writing. I love this.
Should we shift to the palate?
Please.
Oh,
Because
please.
I know how much I love listening to you two tell me.
Look how much time you just spent on the colour of a whiskey that's not even in front of us.
I know, right? But it's a good colour. Everybody who's listening to this instantly knows what colour I'm talking about
Yeah.
because they've all seen Iron Brew dyed koi carp. For our palate, we've got the aromatic spice deepens with the addition of, oh yeah, I remember this, bitter chocolate and rich, unctuous black forest cherries. Now, I feel like you and I went backwards
We
and forwards
did. We
about cherries
discussed
for a
that
while.
for a long time.
Oh, my gosh.
Make no mistake, though, this is not a cakey sweet dram.
Nope.
There is a delightful oakiness and classic Westland signature running through it to keep you from a chocolate overload. Oh, I'm so thirsty. Finish.
Chocolate Overload is actually my new Instagram name.
Which
You're
is why
coming
you're...
back on Instagram?
Hey, that's the takeaway.
That's his TikTok channel. So we've got here, and you laughed at me when I wrote this, a rich and intense dram which has a pleasing and drying cocoa-packed finish. You'll be reaching for another. Listeners, there's
I've
just
never written
one,
that in a finish ever.
there's just one exclamation mark.
You tried to, though. You tried to.
And just to be clear,
And then I panicked and deleted it.
is it Yule as in Yule?
You're back to your neighbour's Christmas
Yeah,
again.
back to the neighbor's Christmas wreaths.
No, but we'll edit that so it is.
Can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, clearly, I'm excited about all of these whiskeys,
Yes.
but we've got two partners that we're collaborating
Yeah.
with. So I want to
Should we-
give the Ardnamurchan
So get some
notes.
Ardnamurchan
Oh,
taste
lovely,
in
yeah.
it?
Because
Yeah.
this one was so. I mean, it's Ardnamurchan, right? But
Right.
yeah, just let's
and I
hear
was
these
really
notes.
excited, so excited
Yeah.
to be allowed into the warehouses to pick casks.
They don't sell to just everybody.
No.
Just like Westland doesn't. Just like Wild Turkey doesn't, right?
Crawled over
Yeah.
casks. You were in the back corner.
Yeah.
There was a cask without a barcode. That's
It
the,
looked real sad. I was like,
Spiders
I'm
came
gonna take
from
this
it.
home.
that's
Yeah.
the one. This is the one you selected. It was a dirty, dirty day.
Should we have some
All
colours?
right. Now it's got dirty. To please, quick.
Some colours. We've gone for reflective gold.
That's Jason.
That's a Jason
That's
colour.
a Jason
Not
color.
reflexive gold.
Not reflexive gold.
Reflective gold.
So on the nose for this, yes, I remember this. One note that we
remember the
came
glow.
up initially, and even in the warehouse, which is always a fun but dangerous place to be tasting whiskey.
It is. It is.
It's very different to being in the underheated conditions of my Glasgow flat. We have, it was gooseberries. It was that kind of like immediately that kind of fruity
Yeah.
gooseberry thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when we came back to our senses and wrote tasting notes, I do remember talking about that, this kind of idea of, we had a kind of oaky, because it's obviously in bourbon, but there's, again, not full sweetness, there's a cocoa powder happening in there. We've got here a savoury component that delivers a certain oomph.
Guilty.
I think that sounds like a Jason note.
Yeah.
I think we agreed on it though.
We absolutely did.
Oomph.
Oh,
PH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a PH. I feel like an F would be.
Two O's.
Oof. Yeah.
Two
That's-
O's.
That's now you're an oofed.
No, it's an oomph.
Two O's and an M.
OOMPH.
OOMPH. Oomph. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, I like that.
I think with an F would be vulgar.
Absolutely. That's
Zach.
disgusting.
I'm moving us on immediately.
Yeah, my gosh.
So the palate, we have got a wonderful presence with flavours that are a little sweeter than savoury, with a prickly pepperness that moves towards a malty cerealness. And I do remember the first time I tried this, that kind of like lovely rich cerealiness, the maltiness that you get in an Ardnamurchan is loud and proud in the middle of this, and it was great. From the first sip that we pulled with Graham, I was like, it's
such a bright,
cool,
clean dram. I really like it. Yep.
So our finish, we've got long and lasting with bright fruit, chunky orange marmalade. I feel like we've done, in our ROW whiskies, we've had quite a few that have got a marmalade-y character. Yeah. And I really enjoyed them, which is strange because I cannot stand marmalade.
Interesting.
But in a whiskey, I quite enjoy it.
But I also remember you were adamant that it had to be chunky.
Yeah,
the chunk was important to the orange marmalade note here.
Oh, I like that.
The chunk was important to the marmalade hater.
To go with the oomph.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've also got in here candied cinnamon. So our little, for our new labels, for those of you who are paying attention to our new ROW labels, when you spin that bottle around to where we've got the flavometer, TM. We've started adding some truncated label notes. That's what Jason calls them.
Thank you.
And for our Ardnamurchan, we've got bright and fruity yet savoury.
Yeah, and we were trying to work with that interplay.
Yeah.
And trying to communicate that to somebody, pulling that off a store shelf and taking a look at it.
Look at this. We have Ian Allen calling me.
I've got a
live
missed voice call from Ian Allen.
Hello. Oh, you're at our front door. Can you go? I'll go grab you.
Ian Allen is in the building.
Howdy.
Where are we in this podcast right now?
Who are we?
Talking Ardnamurchan. We did the notes. We got the truncated label note. We got a phone call from Ian Allen, with whom we're dining and drinking this evening. We, in this episode, have discussed Glenmurray being at the Newcastle Independent Bottlers
Festival. The Indie Love Festival.
The Indie Love Festival.
But you guys were
the only OB at an Independent Bottlers Festival.
We got a special invitation, like we should at every event, I believe.
And that's what I said.
Yeah, and our new sales guy Zach was there, so I hope all the indie people was nice to him. You generally are, but
he was actually on the table behind me, and he's a top bloke because he was a fellow Yorkshireman in a land of Geordies.
Oh my god!
Don't pull that face. It's this kind of racism.
Yorkshire folk are everywhere.
Yeah, man. Everywhere.
Yeah, but apart from Yorkshire, because you've all left the building.
Well, like all good colonisers, we've set off around the world.
What's that stat that keeps getting thrown around? How many people in Yorkshire compared to the number of people in Scotland?
It's the same number.
There you go. And what's that number?
5 some million people. 5.5, 6 million people.
Same number of people in Yorkshire as live in Scotland.
Yeah.
And Scots don't get nearly as much ground covered as the Yorkshire.
Well, we're really
friends.
industrial people. Historically, you can see that.
Did you invent the television?
We were too bloody busy to invent the TV, and also they're expensive, Ian. We don't have time for that.
Ian's about to recite that very famous tea towel that says Scots did this and Scots did that. Did you do tarmac? Did you do the telephone?
Well, anyone who's been to Yorkshire knows that everywhere is cobbled roads, so obviously not. Telephone, why? You just shout. Next.
Joshua, when Ian walked into this building, you poured something into a mug for him.
I did.
It's a fine-looking specimen.
Mug. We've got all sorts of glassware and coffee mugs. We're making this up as we go
right?
along.
You do the best you can.
So what did you pour for Ian that the three of us have been drinking all the way through this episode?
So listen, this past week before I came to Scotland to be with you, to be with Jess, to be with Ian, I was with Connell, Mackenzie, and Carl Crafts from Ardnamurchan Distillery, taking them, well, where were we? New York, I was with them New York, New Jersey, and then they went...
We don't have the answers.
Go easy, Jason. I've been drinking. then they went down to see Jared. Oh no, they went to see Casey up in Massachusetts, and then Jared down in the Mid-Atlantic.
Down there.
And so it's sort of a larger tour for them, and they created a special bottling called the Arden America.
Fantastic.
Bottling, right?
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
So this is their standard. Their standard spirit makeup, which is 50% their peated whiskey, I think around 30 ppm, and then 50% unpeated, all matured in a combination of Oloroso and PX, fully matured in those two cask types or sherry types for 5 years, and I think it's 57.8%.
I think you're correct on that number, because Jess and I were just discussing it when you were opening the door to Ian Allen of Glenmurray Distillery.
So last night,
In case
last
you
night
forgot where it's
you and
from.
I were drinking it, Jason.
Yes, sir.
Were you?
Yes, we were. No, we weren't, Jess.
Sorry, Jess.
Bunch of bastards.
It was so late and everyone was so full.
I'd like to. Yeah, so this is why I was in the hotel room far, far away. I see.
I was ready to go to
see.
sleep, and then Jason said, "So,
That
did
is-
you say you
Oh,
brought
that
a
is
bottle?"
true.
Yeah,
That
it is
is
true.
so
He
true.
said, "You said you brought a bottle, didn't
That's
you?"
so me. Yeah,
and then I
so
said,
me.
"We should call Jess up," and he said, "No, whatever you."
is
No, he
such
didn't. No,
a
none of that.
This is the trouble. You keep getting the singles and we keep getting the twins.
Well, it'd be really weird if I'd booked a family room for the three of us.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Everybody already thinks
wouldn't.
I'm travelling with my two dads. That would really just compound the issue.
So, anyway,
Dinner with your three dads tonight.
Oh, yeah.
there was a note that you had gotten, and it was full on chocolate. And for me, it's that mole sauce, that sort of spicy, earthy kind of chocolate note, just through the end of the palate into
Well,
the finish.
Do you have-
what's my new Instagram name?
Full on chocolate? What was it, Daddy?
Chocolate Explosion.
I've eradicated it from my mind. I just don't want to go back there.
Chocolate Omniscience.
Oh, gosh. Do you have a different chocolate note, perhaps, to those of us who live in a world where mole is not a feature on a menu?
Oh, you're not going to like this, Jess.
yeah.
You will not like this.
Okay. I'm bracing myself.
So I often talk about Inchgour having a mushroomy quality to it. You don't like the mushroomy note.
I do like mushrooms. I'm scared of Jason and the mushrooms for reasons that our legal team have said we're not allowed to discuss.
Yeah, it's a
But
little.
There's an earthiness associated with it, and maybe like a gentle spice going on.
With the mushrooms.
And the chocolate, yeah.
It's cracking though. One of 900 bottles.
And I only say mushrooms because that's an earthy thing, right?
I'm yanking your chain a little bit, but
Oh.
it's only because mole is
Don't touch his mushroom.
don't touch his mushrooms. Is
Do I edit that? Anyway, continue.
no, leave it in.
Okay.
We can all be as confused together.
Mario.
I am. Stop it! You're making me sniff the wrong thing. I'm now smelling the microphone and trying to drink them. Yeah, it's definitely got a really rich, lovely, thick, chocolatey nose to it. Again, like when we were discussing the tasting notes, I hate myself for saying that. It's not like a sweet chocolate, so it's like,
And that's the mole, that earthy kind of thing, yeah.
It's great. I really like this.
Yep.
Thanks for not drinking all of it last night.
I have no comeback to that.
Good.
I kept on saying, like, just call her.
He didn't.
Just
It's okay.
Just
I
give
don't
her
think
a
you
date.
did.
Just give her the
Just
date.
give her the date.
Just give her the date. Give her
That,
the date.
that is the most inside joke. Anyway, listen.
Three of us are loving.
Listen, Ian Allen came here for a reason.
To tell us what he thinks about Arden America.
Well, first of all, top scores for the punnage. Arden America, great name. They did Arden Gherkin as well, of course.
Indeed, in a Glenmurray cask.
Glenmurray cask.
I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but I'm the one that suggested Arden America.
You were the suggester of the name?
I'm Pun Daddy. I'm Sir Puns a lot. Yeah.
I was waiting on. I don't know how to say this, but I'm a big deal.
I was going for it. He's the most American person here.
So enough about Joshua. What do you think about Joshua Ian Allen?
Enough about me talking about me. Why don't you talk about me?
Yeah, definitely the pun daddy. Let's go with that. Yeah, first of all, the colour. It looks like the colour that the tea should be. This is, the tea bag has been in long enough. It's got a lovely dark hue to it, which just is...
It's always the tea bag with you.
It's always
Ian.
the tea bag. I'm always tea bagging. It looks amazing. And how old is this? It's 5. Yeah.
5 years.
So yeah, the PX is definitely taking hold here, and it's stunning. It's got a richness to it. Mole, whatever you want to call it, all great, all wonderful. And the guys there are doing so many great things with whiskey. It's great to see some of the new distilleries, not like the old 126-year-old Glenmurrays that have been around and well practiced. And
These guys have been everywhere.
These guys, they're doing, not to make light of it.
1897.
Have I mentioned it yet? Have I
Enough about Ian Allen. What do we think about Ian Allen?
Have we talked about a Glenmurray and PX cask yet? It's quite stunning. But this is a lovely dram. I'm not going to lie. Slightly jealous. To do stuff of this age, of this quality, is phenomenal. Even out of a mug, I have to say.
Oh, great. We've added a fourth industry professional to add to the glassware confusion. I'm going to take a picture of our assortment of drinking vessels. If it tastes this good in these terrible drinking vessels, I can only imagine what it'd be like when I inevitably steal the bottle from you and take it home with me.
Yeah, I can't wait to get back to America and get my America going on.
America.
We have derailed so far.
So
This
badly.
is the news segment. We have never derailed a news segment.
Wait a second. Are we still in the news?
Listen, Ian Allen's in the building.
Yeah.
Stop
we
saying
need
his
to,
name like
we
that.
need
You're
to
making
make
it
like
so
a
weird.
tree and get out of here.
Jess is finally drinking last night's Ardnamurchan.
Thanks, guys.
Finally. Thank you, Jason.
Gosh dang scoundrel. Let's end it here. Let's smash together 4
Very inappropriate.
Go easy here.
horrific glass/ceramic items and say cheers, listeners. Cheers,
Cheers.
Alan. Cheers, Jonathan.
Cheers, Alan. Oh, Alan Winchester.
Not Ian
I thought
Allen.
you were
That's why I
Ian
keep
Allen. His
saying
name's
Ian Allen.
Okay, yeah.
Cheers to y'all and Ardnamurchan.
America.